Hello everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'd like to begin by recognizing that Bishop's University resides on the traditional and unceded territory of the Abenaki Nation. We are located at the confluence of two rivers which were important waterways for the Abenaki people, as their territory covered what we now know as northern, or actually most of New England and southern Quebec. We are particularly pleased at the relationship of respect and understanding that is developing between our university and the Abenaki Nation. Bonjour à toutes et à tous, et merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui, soit en personne ou virtuellement. That's a hard word for me, virtuellement. Thank you all for joining us. As with so many people on our campus, throughout the Eastern Townships, and of course around the world, I was deeply anguished by the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. We have watched the events unfolding in Ukraine with profound shock and dismay. It is horrifying to witness Russia's assault on democracy and the killing of so many innocent people. I know that we all want to reiterate our solidarity with the Ukrainian members of the Bishop's community. I know also that we have all been struck by the extraordinary courage and dignity of the Ukrainian people. This is a significant moment in our history. Our world has changed fundamentally. I believe that we will distinguish between the pre- and post-February 24th, 2022 world, just as the fall of the Berlin Wall represented a fundamental change in the world as we knew it. Ces dernières semaines, j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer certains membres ukrainiens de notre communauté. Nous avons discuté ensemble de la manière dont l'université pouvait montrer sa solidarité avec le peuple ukrainien. Ensemble, nous avons hissé le drapeau ukrainien devant le campus, et c'est avec la collaboration de notre communauté ukrainienne que nous avons organisé l'événement d'aujourd'hui. Each of us wants to help. As individuals, we want to help. We want our governments to help. And as a responsible, engaged, and caring institution, Bishop's University must help. Now, as a university, it's natural for us to support students. And Bishop's has a legacy of over 25 years of supporting refugee students. In discussions with our Ukrainian members of our community, we agreed that the most effective way for Bishop's to help was to welcome Ukrainian students who are able to come to our university. So we've decided that at a minimum, Bishop's will welcome 2 additional Ukrainian students. We will provide free tuition. We will cover the costs of rooms and residence and all the meals in the Dewhurst dining facility. We will also offer them financial and counseling support, and we will do our best to help them feel welcome, whether they are here in Canada temporarily or on a more permanent basis. We hope that many of you will contribute as well. On your way in, you received a card with a QR code on it. It leads to a secure donation page where you can donate using a credit card. And there are also donation boxes in the lobby if you want to make a cash donation on your way out. And if you want to contribute the old-fashioned way, you can send a check made out to Bishop's University Foundation. Just mark support for Ukraine on the check. Of course, any amount that you would contribute would be appreciated. We will match every dollar that you contribute, up to $20,000, because our goal is to raise $40,000. So with $40,000, we're confident that we can welcome at least 2 additional students to our campus and provide them the full range of support that they would need. So, we're going to hear from several people today. First, I would like to welcome Dr. Magdalena Dębinska. She's a professor in the Department of Political Studies at l'Université de Montréal. La professeure Dębinska est experte en matière des politiques identitaires, les conflits ethniques, la réconciliation et l'intégration interethnique en Europe centrale et en espace post-soviétique. Welcome, Professor Dębinska, and thank you for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to this important event for a very important cause. If you are here on a Sunday afternoon, it is because you are already interested, informed, and maybe even directly concerned, having family and friends on the ground in danger. I have been given 10 minutes to explain the ongoing war, to contextualize and to elucidate Russia's aggression on Ukraine since February 24th. It's not much, not enough, but I will try by pointing to Russia's geopolitical considerations first, and then to Kremlin's use of history to justify the war. So Vladimir Putin and many of Russians in general feel that since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia has been ignored by Western powers. Russia's security has not been taken into account while developing the new regional security architecture. For some time now, the aim is to put Russia back into the great geopolitical game. And Ukraine is here the main piece of the puzzle. Controlling Ukraine, but also Georgia and Moldova, and keeping it in Russia's sphere of influence aims at pushing away NATO and the Western world that are perceived as threatening Russia's security, but also Russia's culture or civilization. Till 2014, Moscow had a leverage over Ukraine, as there always have been a more Russophile part of the Ukrainian society, and pro-Russian political parties did have a say in internal and external politics. But it all changed. Since 2014, and the decisive turn of Kyiv towards the European Union, including the signature of the association agreement in 2015, Moscow's strategy was to destabilize the country from within, preventing its EU or NATO membership through the annexation of Crimea, followed by the two self-proclaimed republics of Donetsk and Luhansk that are supported by Russia. Controlling Donbas means controlling Ukraine, or that was the plan, but it failed. And the failure is twofold. First, even though with territorial conflicts, Ukraine's membership in the EU and NATO was a very skim possibility, Western aspirations in Ukraine were not undermined by Donbas. Worse, anti-Russian and pro-Western opinion was only reinforced. Second, the continuous conflict and destabilization in Donbas after 2014 were intended to put pressure on Kyiv for the realization of Russia's best scenario, the reintegration of the separatist regions within Ukraine as territorial autonomies with a special status which would give them a de facto veto power over the future geopolitical orientation of Ukraine. According to Kremlin's interpretation, 2015 Minsk agreement was a framework supposed to accomplish just that. The problem is that the interpretation of each of the 13 Minsk points and the sequence of their execution has always been disputed on both sides. So Kremlin did not achieve its goals, not regarding Donbas reintegration, nor regarding the larger goal of NATO acceding to its demands, that is the retreat of NATO troops from Central Europe and the promise not to enlarge NATO further. Putin failed despite the huge military buildup around Ukraine. Given the unexpected, unanimous response from the Western world, the next step was either to retreat, that is to lose, or to attack. So here we are, an attack on Kyiv and on Ukraine as a whole. So the objective shifted from control over the separatists in order to control geopolitical orientations of Ukraine to subjugating Ukraine directly as a whole in order to recreate the greater Russia, or maybe at least in the short term, to partition Ukraine along some imaginary boundaries that would roughly cover historical territories of Novorossiya and eventually some portions of the Kievan Rus. Something, by the way, that Putin failed to accomplish in 2014 when he mistakenly believed that by successfully annexing Crimea, he would shake Ukrainian unity and prompt the southern and eastern regions, traditionally more Russophone and more Russophile, to break away and to form Novorossiya in reference to a former Russian Empire province that includes Kharkiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Odessa. So history is now used in order to justify the ongoing war, or rather, and I quote, a special operation to protect Russians, but also Ukrainians, from themselves. There is no question, Russian and Ukrainian history is intertwined. The interpretation of different periods of this intertwined history is used and useful to justify the war. We see it in Putin's speeches, the one of February 21st, when he recognizes the independence of the two self-proclaimed republics, but also the one in July 2021 and many others well before. Indeed, Vladimir Putin's discourse is not new. Generations of Russian children have been socialized in a particular history education. Soviet, then Russian historiography has been in conflict with the Ukrainian historiography since 1990s. From the Kremlin's point of view, three periods of this Russian-Ukrainian history are important, especially since 2014. First, the medieval principality of the Kievan Rus that existed between the 9th and 13th century, where Christianity was adopted. Kiev is thus the cultural cradle for both Russians and Ukrainians and Belarusians. Kievan Rus provides the myth of the unity of the East Slavic people, brothers, with Russia as the big brother. True, Russian and Ukrainian culture and language are closely connected. Families are intertwined. But if Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian nations have a common distant past, their respective historical trajectories separated, interlaced, and separated again and again. The second historical myth to which Putin refers is concerning the artificial construct of the Ukrainian state, where Novorossiya's integration into Ukraine was supposedly an error of the early 1920s Soviet politics. Well, let me only say all states are historical constructs. Third, there is this myth of an inherently Nazi Ukraine, but extreme far-right neo-Nazi political parties never gained more than 1.5% of electoral votes in Ukraine. So where does this come from? The Ukrainian national movement developed in the western part of nowadays Ukraine when it was under the Austro-Hungarian rule, while the eastern part of Ukraine was in the Russian Empire and after the First World War under the Soviet rule. Between the two world wars, Western Ukraine was in Poland. There, in Western Ukraine, Second World War was seen as an opportunity for the national liberation movement aspiring to the formation of an independent state against the Soviet Union and against Poland, a liberation that was to happen with the help from an alliance with the Nazi Germany. So now, any Ukrainian national movement or national expression is dubbed as Nazi and thus discredited. The existence of the Ukrainian nation is called into question, and so is the Ukrainian sovereignty. Demilitarization and neutrality, as well as denazification of Ukraine, are on Moscow's agenda. A few days ago, celebrating 8 years of the annexation of Crimea, a big event was organized in Moscow to rally Russian public support for the war for, and I quote, a world free of Nazism. Meanwhile, thousands of lives were lost, cities are destroyed. Some 10 million Ukrainians are displaced, over 6 million internally within Ukraine, and way over 3 million refugees are in bordering countries. They need our help. This is why we are here. Thank you.
and thank you. Merci, Professor Dembinska. So we're also very fortunate to be joined by the Honorable Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. Now, I'm not going to recite his extensive and impressive biography, but here are a few highlights. The ambassador was a Rhodes Scholar. He was Premier of Ontario. He was leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. And of course, most significantly, he holds an honorary doctorate from Bishop's University. When I wrote to Bob to ask him to join us today, I said that sometimes you find yourself where you are most needed. I think this is undoubtedly the case right now. I cannot imagine a better person to represent Canada in the United Nations than Bob Rae. He and his wife, Arlene Pearlie Rae, are two of the most intelligent, thoughtful, engaged, and compassionate people that I know. Now, we generally think of ambassadors as using vague, somewhat obtuse and diplomatic language. I don't think anyone would say that about Ambassador Rae. He has the courage of his convictions, expresses them plainly, without fear or favor. And at this moment, we are desperately in need of people of experience, judgment, and wisdom who are not afraid to speak the truth. And that's what our ambassador has been doing. So, Bob, we are very grateful to you for your leadership and for being with us today. Let me start with, my first question is, so where did you start the day, and where are you now?
Well, if my eyes look like they're almost closed, it's because I started the day very early in the morning, European time, in The Hague. I'm the vice president of the Assembly of States Parties of the International Criminal Court, and we were having a meeting with the management of the court, the judges, and the prosecutor, not only to talk about Ukraine, but actually to talk about a lot of other things about the life of the court. But I was there for 2 days, so I got up early this morning, and now I'm in New York in my office in Manhattan. So I'm delighted to be with you all, and it's wonderful to be back with my friends at Bishop's.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's extraordinary that you would give us this time on such a demanding day for you, as I'm sure all these days have been. Nous allons tenir cette conversation surtout en anglais, mais j'aimerais débuter en français.
Oui.
Donc, ma première question porte sur la réponse des pays du monde. Vous occupez une position privilégiée pour évaluer comment les pays à travers le monde réagissent devant cette crise. Nous savons que 141 des 193 États membres des Nations Unies ont condamné l'invasion russe de l'Ukraine, mais 35 pays ont abstenu, y inclut la Chine et l'Inde, et 5 ont voté contre. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous essayez d'accomplir en tant qu'ambassadeur du Canada, et comment est-ce que vous avez évalué le rôle et l'impact des Nations Unies jusqu'ici?
D'abord, il faut reconnaître qu'un vote comme ça, c'est une expression très importante de l'opinion du monde. Même ceux qui sont abstenus n'étaient pas en faveur de l'invasion. Ils ont beaucoup d'autres raisons pour lesquelles ils ont voté contre, des raisons économiques, des relations avec la Russie, qui est un pays important dans le monde. Mais aussi, je pense, parce qu'ils voulaient être clairs qu'ils étaient d'accord avec la condamnation, mais ils trouvent qu'il y a des exemples où il y a d'autres invasions, surtout l'invasion d'Irak, où on n'a pas vu la même réponse des pays de l'Ouest. Même on dirait que c'était les pays de l'Ouest qui étaient responsables pour l'invasion de l'Irak. Le Canada n'était pas là. M. Chrétien a refusé d'appuyer un tel événement. Mais c'est toujours compliqué. Mais je crois que la Russie est assez isolée, dans le sens que même dans le Conseil de sécurité, ils étaient seuls. Et à l'Assemblée générale, il n'y avait que 5. C'est pas beaucoup. Et ça représente une isolation importante de la Russie face à cette situation. Le problème que nous avons, c'est que les Nations Unies, ça dépend beaucoup. D'abord, on est en train de coordonner tout le travail humanitaire. Nous aurons des discussions cette semaine pour faire tout cela. Déjà, ils sont en train ils ont des gens qui travaillent dans le pays pour donner l'assistance aux gens déplacés. C'est un désastre du point de vue humanitaire. C'est beaucoup de destruction, beaucoup de morts, et surtout des gens qui ont perdu leur maison, parce que la stratégie des Russes, c'est de détruire l'infrastructure, les maisons, les écoles, les garderies, les hôpitaux, pour dire clairement aux Ukrainiens, allez-vous-en, déplacez-vous. On ne veut pas vous voir ici en Ukraine. Et aussi pour créer une instabilité très importante dans tous les pays qui reçoivent les réfugiés, parce qu'il y a un nombre de réfugiés qui viennent, il y a presque 1,5 million en Pologne, des milliers dans tous les pays voisins, et nous verrons encore ceux qui vont arriver au Canada et en Amérique du Nord. Alors ça va causer toute une crise d'humanité pour tous ces pays. Et la stratégie de la Russie a toujours été de créer des problèmes pour l'Europe, de créer des problèmes humanitaires, de créer des problèmes de politique. Ils donnent l'argent, ils ont été actifs dans la campagne de Brexit. L'argent russe est partout dans l'Europe, une force profondément corrompante. Et c'est pourquoi je crois qu'ils vont continuer, c'est ce ils ont l'intention de continuer de faire. Franchement, je crois que le problème, on a une stratégie de 4 parts. Si je peux essayer de vous donner un sommaire assez rapidement. D'abord, on regarde la situation de l'impunité, de responsabilité pour des actes criminels, des crimes de guerre, des crimes contre l'humanité. Deuxième point, on donne l'argent en Ukraine. L'économie de l'Ukraine a tombé de presque 35%. Alors, c'est très difficile pour le pays. Alors, on donne l'assistance qu'on peut donner et ça continue. On donne des choses militaires pour leur aider à faire battre et on espère que ça peut aider, on voit une résilience profonde, importante de la part de l'armée ukrainienne et la population ukrainienne. Et puis, on aide dans le domaine humanitaire. Et ça va durer pour longtemps. Clairement, et puis, on a des sanctions. Alors, avec tout ça, avec toute la stratégie qu'on a, les sanctions peut-être les plus compliquées, les plus strictes qu'on a vues depuis des années, et qui ont un impact important sur la Russie, avec l'aide militaire, avec tout ce qu'on peut faire pour aider le pays du point de vue économique et aussi pour faire ce qu'on doit faire pour l'impunité et pour l'humanité, pour l'assistance humanitaire. Alors, on fait beaucoup. Est-ce que ça suffit? Moi, je pense pas. Je pense qu'il faut toujours faire plus. Et c'est ce que le Premier ministre va discuter avec nos collègues à l'OTAN cette semaine. C'est ce que nous allons discuter cette semaine ici à New York sur surtout la question humanitaire, mais aussi pour voir quel d'autre est-ce qu'on peut faire. Parce que, clairement, ça n'a pas arrêté la décision de M. Poutine de faire un assaut terrible sur la population ukrainienne, sur l'humanité ukrainienne. Alors, on doit faire tout l'effort pour aider la situation.
So let me build on that. There are I was just listening to the news today, they're saying 10 million Ukrainians are displaced.
That's huge.
That's a quarter of the population.
Yeah.
And as we know, several million who have left the country, mostly women and children and senior citizens, have sought refuge in the neighboring countries. I guess the question we all have is, what can Canada do? What should we do? What can we do as individuals? What can we do as an institution? What can we expect Canada to do to help the Ukrainians?
Well, we're doing a lot of things on a lot of fronts, and so are a lot of other countries. Uh, but I think it's also important for Canadians to feel that they should do whatever they can. We're going to be accepting thousands of Ukrainians as temporary residents under this new program the government has announced this week. That's going to be huge. We have done a lot over the years with Vietnamese refugees, with refugees from a number of other countries, Syrian refugees that we took in 2016. We've done a lot to open up Canada and Canadian homes, Canadian families. We have one of the best refugee sponsorship programs that's based in families, based in neighborhoods, based in communities, so that we're not just saying, come and, do the best you can. We're trying to provide ongoing help and support. We did it for the Hungarians in 1956. So we have a tradition of doing this, and it's really a matter of opening up our hearts and our homes and frankly our wallets to make sure that people are given an opportunity to work and given an opportunity to deal with all the trauma that they're going to have to deal with. Secondly, I think that Canadians need to continue to work with the political leaders of the country and really encourage the political leaders to do everything they can to continue to lead. And I think that's something which is a reality in our life, that politicians respond to where they think public opinion is going. I think public opinion has been extremely supportive of everything that's being done. And I think public opinion shares my view that we have to do even more because they are so offended by what Mr. Putin is doing. This is his war. It has all the earmarks of a brutal war of terror on the people of Ukraine. And I think people are deeply offended by it, as they should be. I think the professor Obdinska gave us a good description of why Putin thinks this is okay. But it's not okay. I mean, none of that theology or any of that stuff really makes any sense. Ukrainian nationalism has been a force of life in Ukraine for a long time, precisely because they've been living in other people's empires, and they've had their language and their culture, their way of life for such a long time. And we know this as Canadians because we've accepted so many Ukrainians. We took two huge waves of Ukrainians to Canada. One group who were fleeing the Tsar, and the next group who were the victims of terrible, terrible destruction from both the Russians and the Germans in the Second World War. Ukraine was a battlefield. It was called, in Timothy Snyder's book, he calls it the Bloodlands. And so it's left terrible damage for people. So people came to Canada. So we know the Ukrainian people. We have a huge diaspora. We're very close to them. And I think we just have to keep building those ties and do everything we can to strengthen that relationship and to work really hard with other countries. I mean, my main job is, frankly, in New York, is working with others and trying to convince other countries that we can do more. And we have to think through all the strategies that we can that will get us to a better place.
So we've all heard President Zelensky increasingly imploring NATO to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And as we know, NATO has steadfastly refused to do so out of fear of what the consequences would be in terms of a worldwide conflagration. But do you think that's the right decision? And are there other ways that Canada and the NATO alliance can help Ukraine defend itself beyond what's already being done?
Well, first of all, I do have talents, but I'm not a military strategist. So I would only say that don't look to me for details. There's a lot of armchair military strategists out there.
Right.
What I know about a no-fly zone is that it requires, it's an effort to command the airspace. We have done that in situations where we were already in a position of strength. So we were in a position, for example, when we did it to try to save the Kurds from Saddam Hussein, it worked because Saddam Hussein couldn't match it. The problem is, quite frankly, that Russia has two vetoes. One veto is in the Security Council, which they abused. But the second veto is the most important one. And that's their nuclear weapon. And we have to deal with the fact that Russia is a nuclear power. And a war with a nuclear power is a very different thing than a war with a country that's not a nuclear power. So we need to understand the consequence of that. And I think the key word that you used is about consequences. We need to think about what are the consequences. The last thing we want to do is make it worse. We want to make it better. And I think that there's always if I may make the distinction between impulsive thinking and consequential thinking. Impulsively, we want to just say, let's just pound them every way we can. But we need to understand the risks of that. And I'm not risk averse as a person. I do think we need to supply them with more weaponry. I think we do need to continue to upgrade the equipment that they have. And even that itself will be seen as provocative by the Russians. So we're walking a very fine line. I think the Russians are trying to say to us, you do one more thing and anything could happen. And they're trying to create the sense of, we're so crazy, we don't know what we're going to do.
Right.
And that I think we shouldn't be intimidated by that. We have to understand that we do have to provide help, that it's totally legitimate help, and that what President Putin is doing is completely illegitimate. The act of aggression that he's committing against the Ukrainian people, the attacks on civilians, it's against he's just thrown the rule book out, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the rule book any more than Stalin did. I think he's a real spiritual follower of Stalin. He's not a communist, but he has the same view that Stalin had about the fact that cruelty was a critical tool of political power. And that the way you gain control over people is by just intimidating the hell out of them. And you kill people and you treat people cruelly. And the things that he's done, that he's authorized, or that people around him have done, poisoning people, and this is attacking people's security in every way possible, sending people to jail for 14 years, Navalny, poisoning, killing his opponents. Nemtsov, Urban Kotler and I met with Nemtsov in 2010 before he was killed on the streets of Moscow. This is a government that rules by sheer brutality, and it's a different kind of government than is acceptable. And so we have to deal with this. And so I agree with you when you say it's a new deal, but we have to every once in a while we have to be reminded that we share the planet with some really bad people. And you don't necessarily succeed in dealing with those people by being nice to them. It doesn't work. It's not like we have to understand them. Oh, you want to rebuild the country that the empire you thought you had 100 years ago. Oh, okay, we'll do that. That doesn't sound too bad. This isn't the way the world works. And so we have to be stronger. And I think that's a growing consensus in the West. I think that's part of what the NATO meeting is going to be about really making it clear that we have to strengthen everything we do. And I think, frankly, that's something that the Prime Minister wants to do.
So again, one of the questions I know we're all asking ourselves is how do we get out of this? How does this get resolved? How does this war end? And people ask the question, what's the off-ramp for Putin? But his demands are that Ukraine disarm, that it declare itself, permanently neutral, that it cede Crimea and the, eastern parts of Ukraine to Russia. It doesn't seem that those things are possible. The Ukrainians would never accept that. So I know it's be easy to say that if you knew the answer, but so what do we do? How is this going to play out?
Well, it's very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. I've obviously had lots of conversations with people here, people who are much smarter than I am, in the academic field and in the strategic field, and military experts and others. Follow a lot of people very closely on the internet. Try to find out as much as I can about what people think. And I think it's a very, very difficult situation. Putin, one foreign minister who I talked to said to me that everybody's setting the bar so high for what is a victory for them. And neither one, it's going to be very difficult for everybody to achieve a total thing. Putin is not going to accept defeat. He can be defeated, but it will be cataclysmic for him. He doesn't want to be defeated, which is why I fear that he's going to really take it out on the Ukrainian people, even though it's going badly for him. The Ukrainian army has been much more effective than people gave them credit for. The West has been much more united than I think people gave us credit for. And we're not going to relent. The sanctions aren't going to come off quickly, barring some huge dramatic collapse and change in Russia, and the government comes in and says we give up. Look, you can't let hope be your guide. I mean, it's always nice to hope, but I mean, you've got to think strategically about this. This could be a very long struggle, could be very painful, very bloody, very bad, and with no quick end. Or there could be a ceasefire, and there could be a pause, and there could be some more political discussions about what is possible to do. But I think you've described it in your question. It's very difficult to assume that the things that the Russians are asking for are things that any Ukrainian leader could do. And I think one of my rules in life and negotiating is don't ask somebody to do something they actually can't do.
Right.
Because you can ask people to do something they can do and figure out what that is. But what Putin is doing by the kinds of demands that he is making, he's saying, you're going to have to do this. And Zelensky's saying, I can't do that. I don't have the support to do that. As Professor Obaditska said, the Ukrainian people have been, the public opinion in Ukraine has moved very strongly in favor of what Zelensky is doing. He's become a very powerful, charismatic leader in his own country and, of course, around the world. He's a remarkable spokesman for his people and for democracy, which is the wider question of what this is really all about. It's about the rule of law. It's about human dignity. It's about values. It's about sovereignty. I mean, the basic things that we think in Canada as being exceptionally important. Is why we have a charter. It's why we fought the Second World War. Unfortunately, one of the partners that we had to fight with in the Second World War was a country that didn't actually believe in any of these things. That's Russia. And that has not changed. As I said, he's as cynical as Stalin and as brutal. And that's what we're dealing with.
You know, in the early days of the internet and social media, I think we thought that it was going to herald a new era of accessibility of information to people all around the world, and that was going to help us advance as a world in a more democratic way. And yet, as Professor Dembinska said, this Putin is just articulating the most outrageous lies about the Ukrainian government being neo-Nazi. I mean, it would be absurd in any circumstance, but particularly with respect to the president of Ukraine, who's Jewish and who lost family in the Holocaust. He's claiming that the Ukrainians were carrying out genocide of Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine. The last couple of days, he's starting to say that the Ukrainians are planning to use chemical weapons in the war. He's closed down all independent media in Russia. And yet we're told, with all of that, the majority of Russians still seem to believe him, or at least that's the impression that we're given, that he has significant support. So I don't know, what can be done to at least inform the Russian people about what is really happening?
Well, this is part of a broad struggle, right? We faced it in a way with Trump, in the sense that, I mean, there's a lot of parallels with the autocratic leaders lying as a matter of course, just telling lies, just thinking that that's the way, and the bigger the better, more often the better, and use whatever technology you can. It's not confined to dictatorships. It's a much broader problem of people thinking that if you communicate lies and misinformation, people will believe it. People are gullible, and you can get away with it. And we lived next door to a leader who thought he'd get away with anything. He said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, nobody would think the worst of me. In his case, it might be true. We might not think the worst of him because we have already had some pretty negative opinions. But we're in a battle here for our integrity and the integrity of truth, the integrity of what's going on. There are people who are talking, understand this is tyranny. This is what tyrannies do. And we have to do everything we can to get information into Russia. And frankly, we have to become much more adept at understanding how to use social media. One of the reasons that I use it is not because I've ever taken a course in it, but because I believe that by communicating with Canadians and communicating with whoever wants to listen to what I have to say, some of it will get in. Some of you hope that some of it will get in, but that's just one little thing. But I mean, I think all of us have an obligation to really try to refute the lies. The lie about Ukrainian Nazism is it's a huge misconstruction of history. Because yes, of course, wherever the Nazis went, there were collaborators. Of course there were. And yeah, you know, but it's to suggest that the purpose of an independent Ukraine is to become a Nazi country is just nonsense. It's to be Ukraine. And Ukraine was not allowed to be Ukraine under the Tsar. It was not allowed to be Ukraine under Stalin. And it was a product of the collapse of the Soviet Union that Ukrainians said, okay, this is our chance. Unfortunately, we can't move Ukraine out of the neighborhood that they're in. They're in a very tough neighborhood. And I think that's what we have discovered right now is that it's not as easy as it looks or as easy as it sounds to actually be as effective as I think we all want to be at dealing with a wounded bear, with a country that has lost its empire, that feels that it's being ignored, that it doesn't get the respect it thinks it should get. And so, frankly, they try to get respect in the way that they think it's going to work. And this isn't going to, they're not getting any respect. There's fear, but there's also loathing. And so when you talk to me about Russian public opinion, I don't know what the hell that is. People can't get access to accurate information. They get fed lies every day. What is opinion in that context? I'm not saying they don't have opinions, but I'm just saying it's very hard to know what it would take to change people's minds or how you can give people, because you have this confirmation bias for whatever information you're getting from some neutral source. You say, well, they discredit it right away. And I think we have to learn how to deal with that. And I think it's going to be a major effort. But frankly, public opinion in Germany changed after Hitler was gone. Public opinion in Japan changed after the Second World War. Public opinion can change pretty quickly if people are presented with a different set of realities about how things are. There could be a great future for Russia in the world. I mean, that's a tragedy. I mean, it's an incredibly rich culture. It's such a beautiful country in so many ways. People are so talented and so gifted in so many ways, but they just have a rotten political culture that's been with them for a long time, with exaggerated ideas about fear and power and manhood, anti-gay stuff. The whole thing. It's misogynistic. It's abusive, and that's what has to change. But we have to call it. There's no point in pretending it's not there.
Right. So we've already taken a lot of your time. I'm going to maybe ask one last question, and then if there's something you want to share with us to conclude. Again, the other thing that's on everyone's minds is China, and China's role in this, and is China going to be a facilitator, continue to be a facilitator for Russia or not? And what's your reading? Do they have the capacity to help stop this war? Do they want to?
Well, China has a role to play. They have to think through very carefully what they're doing and how they want to proceed. I think China could play a very constructive role in thinking about how do we lower the temperature, how do we get to a point where there's not as much destruction. China is a country that likes stability. They believe intensely in stability. Now, it's stability that they create, but it's very much part of part of their belief, because of the instability that they went through during the 100 years of chaos that was imposed on them by Western imperialism, the collapse of their political civilization, and you know, the battles with Japan and warlords, and the whole situation. It was a disaster for China. They don't want that to happen. But they are in a competition with the West, so they don't want to just accede to losing what they would perceive as an autocratic ally who's at least not the West. So they're not happy with the prospect of that happening either. And it is fundamentally an autocratic country. It's a dictatorship that specializes in some of the same techniques of using its power very, very brutally. The treatment of the people of Hong Kong, terrible treatment of the Uyghurs, Tibetan population. I mean, China doesn't do pluralism and democracy very well. That's not what they're about. And so we have to be realistic about to what extent they're going to be a really hugely constructive player. But I do think there's an argument that one can continue to use with the Chinese. The first one is, you know this isn't right, and you know it's not going to work, and you know that it's destructive, and it's actually bad for your team. You know, this makes you look really bad, and it is really bad. And so it's not in your interest to be seen to be supporting it. And the second thing is that it's an opportunity for China to play a much more constructive role with a lot of countries that are going to be badly hurt by what Russia is doing. Food prices are going up. There's huge instability in the economy. This is not good for anybody. It's bad for China. It's bad for Africa, which China plays a very strong role in. The possibility of economic collapse is very bad. I mean, this is a horrendously destabilizing event in the life of the world. We haven't even begun to see the full impact of this in terms of the Russian economy, Russian finances, Russian liquidity. As I said, the food supply in the developing world there's a huge number of things that are going to be very, very negatively impacted by this in real time. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen over the next several months. And that's what makes it so painful. I don't think we've begun to see the full impact of this. And I think China kind of understands that's not good for anybody. I don't think they gain from that kind of instability. Not at all.
Okay, well, I promised that we would let you go before 5 o'clock. So I don't know if there's something you want to finish with, Bob, or?
No, I think it's great what you're doing. I think it's really important to reach out. And I wanted to do this with you and with the university, because I think it's just a great example of how we all have to understand that it's not just what the government does or doesn't do. It's about what we do as Canadians. What are we standing for? What are we trying to do? How are we trying to help? And I think it's great that you're doing this, and I'm delighted to have been able to join you. Getting an honorary degree from bishops was a wonderful honor, and something that I value a great deal. I'm very, very proud of being a doctor, and I really appreciate the wonderful celebration that we had with Louise Penny. It was a great day for me. So I feel I'm part of the bishops' community. So I'm very proud to have a chance to participate with all of you today.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. You be well.
Yes,
Thanks,
you too.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks to Fiona and everyone, and it's great to be with you.
Okay. Best to Arlene. See you soon, I hope. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope
Bye.
so too.
Good. So, we have a couple of other people we're going to hear from. I'd like to invite some of the Ukrainian members of the bishops' community to share their thoughts with us. So I'm going to invite Daria Boros, Solomia Salome, and Anna Asmailova, and ask them if the three of you would come up.
Hello, everyone. I am Darja Boros, or as Hungarians say, Boros. I am here on an exchange. For a long time, I was conflicted about my heritage because it's Ukrainian or Soviet. You see, I was born in 1991 into a healing Ukrainian culture. A few years later, a third cultural identity appeared in my life when we moved to Hungary with my parents. So I was growing up in a cultural triad, and I found it challenging to connect with only one identity. Now I know this is because my identity and nationhood are interconnected. When I heard the news on February 24th, my first thought was that this could not be happening. I only heard stories about World War II from my great-granddad, how he fought, how he got captured, and then how he escaped. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel or what to think. How did we get here? Is this nightmare truly happening? And it is. My thoughts were of my family's safety. I felt helpless. I felt ashamed because I cannot even start to comprehend what they are going through. I love them. They are me and I am them. Their fate is inextricably tied to me, to us all, to the fundamental principles of peace and democracy. The Russian government has attacked Ukraine, bombing hospitals, kindergartens, and shooting civilians. The Russian government is also using 18, 20-year-old young men to execute a crazy man's horrifying endeavors. The Russian government is committing a crime against life. Peaceful life with its wonders and beauty, where everyone is connected. Our fates are bound up together in a war happening thousands of kilometers away in Eastern Europe. But it is of immediate and pressing concern. No matter where we came from, where or how we grew up, we all understand that the killing has to stop. And war is never a way forward. From my bishop's dorm room, I am doing what I can to help my family and the Ukrainian community so far away, struggling in war and horror. And I am asking you to help and support those Ukrainians who are in need and who are coming here and joining the Canadian society, contributing to it. Today, a donation translates within a week into supplies and shelter for children, women, and elderly under siege. I am grateful that you are here. I am thankful that you showed up for people and democracy. Thank you for giving me hope that together we can make a difference in a world that feels increasingly disorienting. It means the world to me that you came and that I can share my story with you.
Good evening to everyone who have decided to join us today. 2 weeks ago, a retired elderly woman called Nadia was living alone in her apartment in Kyiv, the capital city of Ukraine. She lives on the 9th floor and due to her age, can only use the elevator to make trips to the local store and neighborhood. In the early hours of February 24th, bombs hit her street and cut off all the power in the building. Her neighbors fled immediately. She was locked in her apartment for 5 days with no access to water and no chance to leave the 9th floor to go to the underground shelter. This lady Nadia is my grandmother. When volunteers from the neighborhood finally reached her and put her on the train to Poland, she found herself with families who did not know where they were going. Kids as young as 8 or 12 came to speak with her. Several of them were traveling alone without a guardian because the parents were either enlisted in the army or caring for their compromised elderly in shelters. Ukrainian families have suffered a lot in those past few weeks. You've heard the stories. Kyiv, my city, became a living catacomb overnight. People are taking shelter in metro stations, waiting out air raid alarms as the cities are being sieged. Airports are bombed. Humanitarian corridors are being targeted. Schools, residential homes, a kindergarten, and an orphanage are all being destroyed. Our museum curators are transporting cultural relics underground. In metro stations, our songs are being sung to children who are far too young to know what it feels like to be in the midst of a war, much less being alone without their family. These past 4 weeks, there have been many lies spun around to suit the narratives of cowards. There has been a lot of rage, grief, loss, and blood, and a disgusting display of greed, deception, and tyranny. The intensity of the suffering caused by this war is unjustifiable and unforgivable. But our people hold their ground and courage in the face of it. Elderly who once served in World War II are demanding to take up arms again. Civilians are volunteering to shield each other and join the recruitments. Our people are fighting hard to protect their land, heritage, and sovereignty. They have exhibited unbelievable courage, and we honor them for their sacrifices. That is what happens when your home and family are put at risk. That is what resilience born out of terror looks like. A human being will do their best to survive. We will do more than survive. If you as Canadians say you uphold the values of democracy, liberty, safety, and truth, then I beg you, let this compassion you claim to hold finally reveal itself. Be empathetic enough. Think critically of the news you hear and the words you say. Be compassionate to those seeking asylum, funds, and support. Defend these values of yours. Stand against the blatant violation of these values that is happening right before your eyes. Stand with the people who are fighting in blood for nearly a decade now to be free. Stand with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini і героям слава!
Hello, my name is Anna Izmailova. I'm bishop staff, and I came to Canada in 2011. I came from Ukraine, from west of Ukraine, and now, you know, everyone, my city, it's named Lviv, because we see a lot of news now on TV. And when I thought about my testimony, I decided to write a letter in perspective, how I would like to see my country when I will be back again. So I did it in form of letter to my friend. I'm sorry. To my dear Ukraine, my friend, in these last days and weeks, we heard and seen a lot about you, my native country, Ukraine. We have seen your ruined streets and mutilated cities. Your frightened people have fled with children and elderly, trying to save the last that they have, their lives. And it seems that there is no end to the war, and that Ukraine has never lived any other life, only this one. But despite everything, I want to remember you the way you were when we parted, full of life, beautiful, prosperous, with good and kind people, and a gorgeous culture. You have always been open to different religions, races, and nationalities. You have always harvested so much that you can feed your own citizens as well as others. If you ever go to visit Ukrainian, Ukrainian, he will feed you until you are full, even if you didn't plan to eat, because we Ukrainians know what hunger is, and that is how we express our life, love, and cares through food. I hold in my memories that you, Ukraine, are a singing nation. You have so many lovely, funny, and yes, also sad songs that have come down to us as a heritage from our ancestors. Songs are now for any occasion you can imagine. I know, I believe that you will rise from the ashes like a phoenix. You will be as lively, as charming as before, and even stronger. Your cities will be intertwined with bright ribbons of life, and we will sing together the glory of your victory. My dear friend Ukraine, I look forward with all my heart to the moment we meet again. I love you, and Slava Ukraini! Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Solomia. Thank you, Anna, for sharing with us. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your extraordinary strength. I hope you know that we are with you, and we want to do anything we can to support you and your families and the people of your country. I'd like to invite Dr. Art Babayants, the head of Bishop's new musical theater program, Fanny Gadet, the head of the Bishop Singers, and the cast members of the brilliant production of Godspell that was just performed on this stage a few days ago. So I'm going to ask if you would all come up and hand the stage to Dr. Babayants.
Good afternoon, bonjour, dobry dzień. My name is Art Babayants. I'm of Armenian origin, and 2 years ago, Armenia went through a similar situation, and my family lost a family home. It's now part of a different country. 6 months ago, I was in Toronto talking to an artistic collaborator of mine, Halime, whose actual name, Halime is a Turkish name, but her actual name is Kurdish. Her brother was killed by Turkish special forces in Syria because he was part of the Kurdish resistance. For the last 2 years, there's been a lot of death and loss. But it's really hard to live when you constantly think about death and loss. There needs to be hope at any point, even when you're losing your family home, even when battles are happening. Ukrainian songs were mentioned, and we will sing a song from Gospel for you so that you could leave with hope today. But before we sing the song, I would like to tell you a very brief story that happened to me in Moscow, Russia. I was teaching English and theater in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Putin just became president. He wasn't really elected. He was sort of appointed by the previous president. And I was part of a jury I can't quite remember what we were doing. It was a long time ago, but I had to go to different schools in Moscow, central Moscow, and I had to judge, I think, the quality of pedagogy or something like that. And I remember going to one school in central Moscow, and the principal welcomed me and served me some tea and cookies, whatever it was, I can't quite remember, before the official event started. And as I entered the office of the principal, I was struck. I think it was 2001. I was struck because I saw a huge portrait of Putin on the wall behind the principal's chair, pretty much like Nicholas II or Vladimir Lenin was there before. And I asked the principal, I'm sorry, what happened? Was there a memo? Was there an order to place a portrait over there? Like, is that how bad things are, that you need to show your affinity to the Tsar? And the director said, the principal said something that I will never forget. She said, no, there was no memo. I put it there myself. So I think the message of this story is, let's think about whose portraits we place in different parts of our rooms, who becomes our idol, and how serious we are about it. Our personal choices are very important. Who we vote for, those things are really important. Putin didn't come out of nothing. He came out of the willingness of certain people to serve a higher power. So our choices are important. Thank you for being here, and please enjoy a beautiful song from the musical Godspell.
Refreshing rain, but all good gifts surround us, are sent from heaven above. Thank the Lord, oh, thank the Lord for all his love. We thank thee then, O Father, for all things bright and good, the seed time and the harvest, our life, our health, our food. No gifts have we to offer, for all thy love imparts, but that which thou desirest, our humble, thankful hearts. All good gifts surround us, are sent from heaven above.
So on everybody's behalf, to you, Art, to Fanny, to the cast, thank you for that beautiful performance. You know, in the spirit of that song, The Gift, I am going to remind you that one of our objectives is to raise funds. So you do have, those of you here in the theater have that card that has the QR code on it, and I'd encourage you either now or later to make a gift that way. If you're watching online, please, equally, you can go on the Bishop's website and make a contribution, or as I say, you can just send a check made out to the Bishop's University Foundation. So we really appreciate it if you would do that, and as I said, the university is going to match whatever donations you each make. So we're pretty much getting to the end of the event for today. We have one last set of speakers I'm going to ask to come up. So Annick Corbeil is our Manager of Student Life and of Bishops International. Michelle Murray is the Dean of Arts. Denise Lozier is the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Principal. And Michelle and Denise are members of the board of the Service d'aide aux Néo-Canadiens here in Sherbrooke. So Annick, Michelle, and Denise are going to speak about the resources available in our community for people arriving from Ukraine.
Hello, everyone. Bonsoir. There are a large number of international students at Bishop's. About 20% of our student population is composed of international students, but also permanent residents, Canadian citizens from such a diversity of backgrounds and origins. The work of the Bishop's International Office is to offer supports and services to international students, and hopefully to help create a sense of community and a home away from home of sorts. Notre rôle aussi au Bureau international de Bishops est également d'offrir des expériences internationales et interculturelles ici sur le campus, mais également à l'étranger. Toutes sortes d'expériences internationales. Donc, we believe, and we hope that intercultural learning, intercultural encounters do contribute to creating, meaningful bridges of mutual understanding and learning, and deep and genuine curiosity across our differences. We have to believe that. We have to continue believing that. Sometimes, it takes just that one conversation with a neighbor or someone who's just very different from us, or a start of an acquaintance or a friendship, and suddenly, our perspective shifts a little bit. Je pense qu'on a tous des expériences comme ça où on se souvient d'une conversation étonnante avec quelqu'un d'extrêmement différent de nous, et puis tout à coup, on a vu un peu nos perspectives changer, notre regard sur l'autre se poser un peu différemment avec un peu plus d'ouverture. With the horror and suffering we're all witnessing in Ukraine, the work we do seems more important than ever. Every day, upon waking these past few weeks, like many of you, my thoughts go to our Ukrainian students and to their loved ones. I've been extremely humbled and moved over and over again today by you, our Ukrainian community members and students. You're truly amazing. You're truly extraordinary. There really are no words. The supports offered by Bishops International, but many of our colleagues and professionals across this institution to Ukrainian students will differ, will vary according to your needs and to their needs new Ukrainian students coming to Bishops, perhaps. And they range from counseling services to academic accommodations, perhaps for students who need to change something to their schedule in these times, help finding housing, immigration advising as well, regarding study permits and work permits and post-graduation work permits, and much more. We're, of course, very closely following all the immigration processes and decisions that are currently being made by Immigration Canada. At this time, Ukrainian citizens can apply for temporary visitor status in Canada and also work permits for up to 3 years. And what we know now is that upon arriving to Canada, students will be able to apply for study permits and study visas. We need to continue advocating, and that is also our work, to work with our colleagues at other Canadian universities and institutions, and certainly in Quebec, to ensure that these processes are efficient and smooth and rapid. And so we will continue our advocacy work for that, and ensuring that our current students are also able to keep their status and their permits and stay in Canada as long as they possibly wish. So it is impossible at this time to know how many Ukrainian students will seek refuge in Canada or in the Estrie region. Il est vraiment impossible de dire aujourd'hui à cette heure-ci combien d'étudiants et combien d'Ukrainiens viendront au Canada et certainement dans notre région. On va travailler de près avec des organismes locaux, communautaires, pour être prêts aussi à ce jour où il y a possiblement des étudiants ukrainiens qui souhaiteraient se joindre à notre communauté. We'll be there. We'll be there to offer any possible services and supports we can and help new Ukrainian students hopefully find that home here at Bishops and navigate this new world and this new academic setting. And we're trusting and resting on many of you here to come together for that support for those possible newcomers. We'd be so honored to have more Ukrainian students join us. Alors, du fond du cœur, merci d'être là ce soir. Merci pour votre mobilisation, votre solidarité. I've been working at Bishops for a little 2.5 years now, and I continue to be really moved by the strength and the solidarity of this community, especially when students are facing terrible hardships like this. So thank you for coming together once again. Merci beaucoup.
Anik has explained some of the services that Bishops will offer to Ukrainian students coming to our campus. Denise and I want to introduce you to or remind you of a local nonprofit organization that has been supporting newcomers to Sherbrooke, the Sherbrooke area, since 1954. The Service d'aide aux néo-canadiens et canadiennes, or SANC, welcomes immigrants and refugees arriving in the Eastern Townships and accompanies them on their path to integration into the socio-economic life of the region for however long they are here, and also contributes to intercultural rapprochement. Some of the services that are offered include temporary housing. For example, SANC provides newcomers temporary housing to give them time to find a more permanent place to live. It also helps by making appointments for housing visits, accompanying newcomers during these visits, and assisting with lease signing, giving information sessions on different aspects of living here in Quebec, such as our healthcare, banking, taxes, dealing with our winters, acting as an intermediary with institutions, organizations, and the various levels of government as well. Access to work is also within the tool house of SANC. It offers assistance and support in finding a job, or if individuals wish to return to school, it facilitates that. Preparatory training for the job search, job placement support and integration, recommendation of candidates to employers, and accompaniment as needed. And it also supports businesses in managing cultural diversity.
The SANC also offers to act as a school liaison. So the new Canadian intake service facilitates the transition of newly arrived immigrant families into the school system and assists with communication between the school staff, the families, and the community. Now, over the years, the SANC has built up a bank of over 100 interpreters. It can respond to requests in more than 30 different languages. And in preparation for Ukrainian families coming to the region, the SANC is looking for interpreters who speak Ukrainian. There's information on their website on how to go about registering as an interpreter. You can also reach out to Michelle or I, or there's Marie-Pierre, who's also a member of our board, who's in the audience as well. And in addition to its qualified staff, the SANC counts on 100 or so volunteers who provide thousands of hours of essential services each year to achieve its mission. Comme je viens de mentionner, le SANC facilite la transition des familles immigrantes nouvellement arrivées dans les milieux scolaires et assiste dans la communication et la collaboration entre le personnel scolaire, la famille et la communauté. De plus, le SANC a développé au cours des années une banque d'interprètes qui regroupe plus d'une centaine d'interprètes. Elle peut répondre aux demandes d'interprétation en plus de 30 langues différentes. Et en préparation à l'arrivée de familles ukrainiennes, le SANC cherche des personnes parlant l'ukrainien qui accepteraient de faire partie de leur banque d'interprètes. Et finalement, comme tout organisme non but lucratif en service à la population, les bénévoles sont toujours à la recherche et sont appréciés. Merci.
Thank you, Annick. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Denise. So as we conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who's joined us today, here in person or virtually. You've demonstrated once again that we are a community that cares and wants to make a difference. Je souhaite réitérer notre solidarité avec les membres ukrainiens de notre communauté et avec le peuple ukrainien. Il est d'une importance vitale que nous soyons unis pour condamner et affronter l'agression injustifiée et non provoquée de la Russie contre l'Ukraine. Donc, merci à tous, ceux et celles qui nous ont rejoints pour manifester leur soutien. You know, we all hope that peace and respect for the democracy and territorial integrity of Ukraine can be restored urgently. We're a small university, and we are a small community. Each of us can only make a small contribution. But together, many small contributions can make a major difference. So just before we leave the theater, I want to just remind you that there is a silent auction in the lobby, and I want to thank the local businesses, organizations, and individuals who have contributed items for the auction. All the funds raised will be used to support Ukrainian students. So we'll keep the auction open, let's say, for another 15 minutes, so just a little bit before 6 o'clock, and we'll let the highest bidders know as soon as that's done. We're going to close with the singing of the Ukrainian national anthem, and I would like to ask any members of the Ukrainian community who are here if they would come up and help lead us in the singing of the anthem. So please. We have a recording to go with it, so you don't have to worry that you're going to have to carry the tune all by yourselves. So please come forward. Thank you all. Slava Ukraini.